Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this session, we are going to see how to use the annotation schema mapping of GraphQL using Spring Boot framework. So what is schema mapping? Schema mapping is actually helps you to separate out the nested element from that parent table. So you need to have the following dependencies in order to run the GraphQL. So I'm going to explain you using this user table. Let's say in my project I have a user table where I have this accounts, right? I want to fetch these accounts only when I'm going to define it in the query, right? That is the advantages of having the GraphQL. But if I simply define this in the entity classes, like this user table as having one-to-many relationship with accounts table, which means one user can have multiple accounts. But I don't want to load it every time, right? So let me explain you in a real time. So let me run this application. Now in a schema, as you can see, I have this user. I'm mapping it similar to what I have here, all the variables. And whenever what happens, if I'm going to execute this query, find all, right? This get all user is going to fetch it everything from this table, which means all the elements of that table, the table data as well as the child data. It's going to look up everything and it is going to send me out. Okay, so if I run this, as you can see, I have id, name, gender, email id, and the child elements, right? But what is GraphQL? If I don't want these two columns, right, it's not going to show me, right? But if I remove account also from here, it should not display me, right? But in the back end, it is going to fetch it all the child elements. Since why? Because we have defined this user table has the relations with the accounts table. So how we can resolve that? I don't want to do that because in production I may have a lot of data, right? For every one parent record, there might be n number of child records, and that child records again will have a number of child records. So I want to avoid that. Okay, to do that, what you need to do, so since you have defined everything in schema GraphQL, what I'm going to do in the controller class, I am going to create a new method called schema mapping. Okay, and then inside that there are two variables, type name and field. So type name is nothing but this user, and field name is nothing but this accounts. So that is what I have defined here. Inside that, what I am trying to define here, I am going to return the list of accounts. Okay, for whatever the user I'm going to get it. So I'm going to take the input as user, I'm going to return the list of accounts. So inside that service, what I'm going to do, I have a separate repository for this account class. Okay, I'm going to define a method which is going to look up for the details. Okay, so whenever I am going to receive an input from that user input table, I'm going to take that id, I will try to find it in the account repository table. If I'm going to have accounts, then bring me, otherwise you don't bring me that records. So I have defined a method for that column. So what I need to do, you need to remove this one-to-many relationship from the parent entity in order to make the Spring ecosystem. Let's not give too many queries at the server level when the account is not defined. So by removing that, make sure you do only the changes on the parent table, not on the child table, because child table will have the reference of this user object, and that user will have a reference of this user ID reference. Okay, so let me restart now. So this application is up and running now, right now. Okay, let me refresh this. Now if you see, now if I'm going to call id and name, it will take only that details from that user. Okay, and I can show you one more thing here. Let me add a debug point here to show you whether this method is getting called or not. Okay, I'm gonna hit here. You see, I'm not getting any call here in this endpoint. Everything is running as a smooth, right? But if I want accounts, and I, because this is the object, I want to take ID and name. Okay, now this time if I'm gonna hit it now, this schema is mapped because this user object required this accounts. That's why it is reaching here. Then I'm going to call that respective method to take all the elements for this user, and then it is going to return me. So now you see I have ID name accounts, ID accounts, and for other elements I don't have any accounts. So likewise, you can have a schema mapping to make the better performance outputs. And I have given just an example of one child table to one parent table, like one to many relationship. Let's think about in a broader way, like in a production environment you might have n number of nested elements, right? So in such cases, when you just want to take only ID and name of some of the tables, you are not going to give that much of load on the server end. You just fetch the basic detail from that table. Maybe let's take an example, you have a grid. For that you need to display this only. I need to fetch that account details maybe in other UI. There you can define and you can load the data. So that is the advantages of GraphQL. It is like you have to define what you want to take. I hope the session is clear, like how to use the schema mapping. Okay, that's all. Thank you.